Oh, hello everyone, and welcome and thank you for joining us. So day 4 of our WayRed week and the 4th in a series of our WayRed webinars. So WayRed, most of you probably know, is our biggest fundraising campaign. We are raising funds to enable us to continue our work of building capacities of communities affected by disasters. And we would really appreciate if you could support our cause and donate generously. So if each one of us here today would spare just £5 or even less, maybe £2, we could raise enough funds to train 2 people on our climate change and disaster risk reduction course and give them skills needed to help their communities protect themselves against the effects of the climate change. So each one of us can do something amazing today. The easiest way to donate is via our Just Giving page. It is on your screen right now, and it will also be in your chat box. So you can just click on it, really nice and easy. So please do donate and support our charity. And back to today's webinar. So today's webinar has been organized and hosted by our patron, Arup. Arup's been supporting us for a number of years and has a huge presence in our WayRed campaign, and we are very grateful for their support and help. Today's topic, insights into creating more sustainable business, and it will be presented by Natasha Connolly, Associate Director in Sustainability, Phil Walsh, Global Sustainable Development Program Manager, Annie Gibbons, Associate in Energy and Climate Change, and Tom Norton, Human Factors Consultant. And before I go, just to remind you that there will be a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions, you can either post them in a chat box or you can ask the question at the end of the session. So I hope that you enjoyed the session. Thank you very much. Natasha, Annie, Phil, Tom, it's all yours now.
Great, thank you so much for that. I'm just going to see if I can share. Millie's going to share the screen. Excellent. Okay, hopefully that all works, the technology. Thank you everyone for joining the session today. As the introduction, we are just discussing the insights into creating sustainable business. And we'll talk about the perspectives from Arup, both from, we are consultants, so we work across a wide range of industry on corporate sustainability and transforming business, but we've also gone through our own journey and continuing to go through our own journey in terms of a sustainable future and how we transform a business. So we thought we would share some of those insights, both from our consulting work, but also from our own journey with you today. As mentioned, Arup has been a partner with RED-R, and we have been supporting RED-R since 1991, and we really feel this partnership is really critical as part of our values and as an organisation. So we were really thrilled to be invited today and share some of our perspectives with you and then the broader industry approach. A little bit of housekeeping. If you have any comments, please do put them in the chat, and any questions or comments, and we'll run through our presentation to begin with, and then we'll pick up those chats and questions at the end, and if hopefully there'll be some really rich discussion at the end. I'm hoping this works. So we've got 4 of us today that are going to be presenting, myself, Annie, Tom and Phil, and we're just going to share, as I said, some little insights both on the Arup journey and our approach. So I'm just going to start. First of all, is that worked? Oh yeah. So first of all, we were asked to talk about a sustainable business, and so a really question is, well, what is a sustainable business? And you may be aware there's a lot of different certifications, there's accreditations, there's all kinds of reporting frameworks that are out there in the industry, both globally and locally. There's kind of 2 trends, I guess. One, the ones on the left are more at the organization level, so that is about your your business as a whole. And then there's more trending, more the ones on the left, which are getting quite specific in terms of, you know, the ones on carbon, on plastics, on circular economy, on buildings. So they're both kind of, there's a myriad of different accreditation systems. I guess it's safe to say that there's no best practice. There's no one that is suited to every organization. There's going to be ones that are more suited to large or global organizations, ones for SMEs, depending on your organization's priority, may suit. So the selection criteria of what we would recommend is very much determined on your organization's ambition and also your commitments, and also the level of transparency that you're wanting to go through. So and also it's worth saying that all of them, you don't necessarily have to do one of these accreditation systems to be sustainable, but they do really to provide that sort of benchmarking and also an independent, you know, accreditation or valuation, which can be really important at an organization level. Between all these sort of accreditation programs or certifications, there's some common themes. The main theme is really about having transparency and accountability. So really being transparent about your organization, what you're doing, and reporting on that, or being transparent, you know, about the benefits, but also where you're really working hard to improve. As part of that, reporting on progress is very important. But also it's about having those policies and strategies and those sort of targets and metrics to really support the ambitions that you've set out. And importantly, this kind of having action, but also that continual improvement. So it's not you've achieved something, that's it, you've moved on. It is about that continual improvement as an organization and really trying to strive for improvement. And also importantly, noting that sustainability, and even if we're getting quite specific about climate or plastics, is it's not just about environment, it's about the triple bottom line approach of environment, social and economic. So it's really encompassing all of those aspects of sustainability to make sure that, you know, we are looking at that triple bottom line approach. So my slides are a bit slow to catch up, but some of the trends we're seeing in the industry, here we go. There's definitely some topics that are becoming more predominant. You know, there has been the traditional more environmental trends that have stayed, but the more common ones, least or more best practice ones at the moment is definitely around net zero. As you can imagine, climate and carbon is of utmost importance, and particularly the focus on COP26 has been the net zero or carbon is very much a trending topic. Nature and nature recovery is becoming more and more, and again, that's one of the themes of COP26 coming up, is really about the impacts that we're having on nature and how we can really, as organizations, can contribute to that. The Sustainable Development Goals are very much being used as a framework and to encompassing that full bottom line approach. And as well as the carbon, the issues about your climate related risks and looking at resilience are becoming more predominant. And then again, bringing in those more social value, the health and well-being, and then looking beyond in terms of human rights and labour and modern slavery and anti-corruption. It's becoming more encompassing as part of those sort of trends. And governance is absolutely key, because it's making sure that people have the responsibility and accountability for what is being approached. And the real trend, I guess, we were also seeing is that, you know, sustainability is no longer an add-on. It's really about integrating and embedding into existing businesses and practices and policies. And that's really making sure that that's where we're seeing trend and approach. It's no longer a tack on, it's definitely part of business as usual. And another aspect is looking beyond your business, because every time you're purchasing something, you're subcontracting to a company, you know, that is a flow-on effect, and supply chain is definitely a huge focus for a lot of organizations, and really understanding supply chain in the first place, who you're purchasing from, where it's being manufactured, what is their labor policy, so beyond the bounds of your original business scope. So in terms of a process, you really need to understand your drivers. Is it about your stakeholders? Is it shareholders? Is it your customers that are asking? Is it your staff? Is there policy regulations or legal expectations? Those things are really important to understand because that will drive what is, in terms of your priority. You need to understand what your baseline is. Where are your main impacts as an organization? How do you report? What data is available? And then through that, you can go through a materiality assessment and understand what your priorities are in terms of, what topics matter most to your business, where do you have your biggest impacts, or where your opportunities are in that process. Looking at your level of ambition as well, and you can often do that by looking at your competitors or in the industry and really understand, are you aiming for good practice? Are you wanting to be a leading edge? That's going to help you sort of help prioritize those actions, and it's going to be short. You'll have some really good quick wins, and they're really important to get momentum up and get staff engagement, but you also need to look longer term in terms of what the paybacks and the processes can be. This diagram was really to demonstrate that there's decisions that are going to be made at the corporate level, which will then influence what happens at your facility or your business level, or through to your processes and your product. This was some work that we did for a shoe company, so it was a bit focused on shoe. And they're all connected. What you do at each different level influences each other, so it's not just a matter of choosing one. They all highly influence each other. So I just wanted to reinforce the importance of looking at all aspects of your business, not just at your corporate level. It needs to infiltrate down. And also, and from an Arup perspective, we've found really good, although processes or policies might be set at a corporate level, that kind of grassroots action has been really important to drive and strive and really influence what happens at a corporate level. So they're all very much connected, and I think they all need to be connected at each level. And going through all this, I think the main thing is just go. get action underway. We often have a fear of imperfection, and I think that's particularly in the engineering and space that we work in, that we want things to be perfect. We want we want to achieve everything. We want the targets to place everything in place, but often you don't have to do it all. You can set priorities, and any action is a good action. Any improvement from what you're doing at the moment is a great action, and so that's what I would encourage you to do, is to really try and influence change. And often, sometimes the big things may not be something visible for staff, like in terms of your power or different things. So some of those sort of quick small wins might be your catering or the pens and the pencils you buy. They may be smaller wins, but they are often ones that get staff talking and engaged, and that's what starts the momentum going. I think also just worth emphasising that we are in a climate emergency, and we've just gone through still going through a global pandemic. And I think from that pandemic, it's been very evident that change can happen quickly. There was things that people would never think would take months and months or years and years to change, but COVID has demonstrated that organisations, people, industry, governance can change super quick in response to an emergency. And I think we need to capitalise on that and use the same urgency for sustainability and climate, really leverage of that ability to change. My final slide, I really like this quote, which is it's about zero waste and being plastic free. But I think it just needs to emphasise that it doesn't have to be done perfectly, but we just need everybody to provide actions. And as I've talked before, any sort of action is an improvement, and that really contributes and really starts the conversation and gets the momentum going. So are there some quick wins you can do? For example, we changed our milk bottles in our office to glass milk bottles, and it really was highly visible. It got people engaged, talking points, which then allowed other actions to be improved. There's also bolder ones that have financial returns as well as sustainability returns, like renewable energy. And then also there's transformational change, which is looking at particularly through supply chain and looking at that aspects as an organisation. So that's a very high level overview. I'm just going to pass on to Annie now. I'm just conscious of time. I'm going quickly as well. But Annie's going to talk you through Arup's net zero journey and what we've done. And I'll pass her over to Annie.
Thanks, Tash. Hopefully you can see my first slide. So yeah, I was going to talk about sort of zoom in really on one particular aspect of what Tash has sort of given a broad background to, in terms of there's lots of different things you can tackle as a sustainable business in terms of best practice. So I'm going to talk specifically about Arup's carbon journey, so our journey towards reducing our carbon emissions. So this is basically our journey sort of so far in a nutshell on the screen, and sort of to pick up on what Tash was talking about, first of all, we needed to think about our drivers. So, you know, way back in January 2019, we sort of made this decision that we needed to set ourselves an ambitious target to reduce our carbon. And that was driven a lot by the climate emergency that was happening around us, but also by the questions our clients were asking us. You know, they were saying, should we be doing something to do with this? So we thought it was very important that we needed to be walking the talk. We were advising people about how to reduce carbon, clients. So we thought we needed to, you know, be showing that we're doing that too. And obviously in trying to do it yourself, you learn a lot in the process as well. So it's great from all sides. One of the first things we did is to sort of understand where we were starting from, like what was our baseline. You need to know what your current activity looks like in order to sort of infect change on it. So, you know, where were our emissions happening? What was the impact of those emissions? How are we reporting data currently? Where was that data coming from? And importantly, we really wanted to look across all scopes. I don't know if everyone on here will be familiar with scopes, but all areas of our emissions. So our direct emissions like our energy, but also our indirect emissions like our travel and our purchasing. So for us, it was really important that we weren't cherry picking some of maybe the easier to tackle ones or the ones we knew the most about. We wanted to look holistically across all of our activity. And then we needed to think about our sort of priorities, that what you might hear is a sort of materiality assessment, like figuring out what mattered to us as a business and what type of business we are. So we are you know, an advice-based business. You know, we don't produce a product, but the advice we produce goes on to impact things. So to reduce our own emissions in the first place is really important from our operations, but then we asked in the process of going further to think about how do we actually put that into the advice we're giving as well. And then also prioritizing, we were sort of listening to what was mattered to our clients, you know, what they were thinking about. They were thinking about future-proofing in their investments. They were thinking about compliance, and understanding sort of that playground really, you know, guided us towards what we sort of chose in terms of like what we needed to tackle on carbon. I mean, compliance was a big one. There's more and more reporting coming in. The UK is kind of particularly leading in that, in terms of what you, from a legislation perspective, you have to comply with, the streamlined energy and carbon reporting being one of them. And we sort of felt that that was a trend that was probably going to be ultimately global. So to get ahead of that and to understand what you're doing was really important. And also, as Tash said, you know, there's a bit of peer pressure in there too. You know, what are our competitors doing? Are they leading on this? Are they talking about it more? Are they doing more? So we really wanted to be, you know, right up there in terms of showing ambition in this area. And we sort of, you know, mapped it out on a sort of a timeline like this, and thinking about where we want to be in 5 years or 10 years. And as I said, transparency and accountability were really important to us. So we picked science-based targets and the race to zero as holistic, transparent sort of targets to go for, that really covered all of the areas that needed to be reported on. And yeah. Oh, I've already moved, have I? So then, you know, I've set out sort of the journey and why we sort of decided to go on it. Then we needed to think about, looking at our baseline, where are our big emissions and what do we need to prioritize to tackle, to reduce? So we boiled them down into basically our energy from our buildings that we use in our building to heat and light our buildings, the travel we do, both commuting and in terms of business travel, the waste we produce, which is very small, but it's an important part of the whole picture, and our purchasing, which is actually a massive part of our emissions, which is, all the things we buy and all the other advice that we buy in order to give our advice. So we went through those and sort of totted them up and figured out which were the big ones and which were the small ones, and also importantly looked at sort of the context around them. What did we have policies around? Did we have sustainable procurement policies? Did we have waste policies? Did we have travel policies? Very patchy, as it turns out. Some offices had travel policies, some didn't. We didn't really have an all-encompassing purchasing policy. It was very sort of ad hoc and piecemeal. And so we needed to think about how we were going to go forward and measure and evaluate those things. So there's this kind of quite sort of busy diagram there, and it's not perfect, but it's just to give a sense of all the interdependencies and sort of the circular journey, starting from what you think you need to tackle and then figuring out how you might measure it and how you might get better at measuring it and what's most important to you, and then coming back again and sort of just keep doing that, really. It's important for us to think about where we could have the most impact. As I said, like our big emissions, of course, they're important. So our purchasing, clearly that's something we really need to tackle, engaging with our suppliers, buying green products, buying less products, but also the areas where we could really have an impact. So there's places you can have some leverage, like your purchasing and your supply chain, but your direct control might be in areas of smaller emissions, but that's a good place to start too. So you can have direct control over how much travel you do, whether you choose to travel for business or not, how much virtual engagement you do. And now, as a result of COVID, staff have got more choice about when and how they choose to come into the office. And also on our energy, where we procure that from, how much of it we use. Those are all things that maybe were slightly smaller than purchasing. It really is the big one for us, but they really are under our direct control. So we knew that those are sorts of things we need to tackle early on. And to do that, we sort of take, you can take a top down and a bottom up approach. And I think Tom's going to talk more about sort of behaviors and how you sort of affect change. But, we did this through a mix of sort of policies from the top down and strategic decisions, guidance documents, but also like encouraging staff to take a role in this and just to understand what the impact of our emissions were and where they could make decisions that would actually change things even in a small way. And those small things are often the hardest to capture. I mean, it's very hard to say this particular action, by implementing this policy, this is exactly how much carbon it saves. It's almost impossible to do that, but it's all about them adding up to, you will see the impact in a sort of in the aggregate, and that shouldn't stop you taking those what maybe seem like smaller actions. Just move on to the next one. And so to that end, sort of my final slide is about like setting and adjusting that trajectory of your ambition of what you want to do. So talking here specifically about carbon, our trajectory was set by the science-based targets. We knew what we had to do. That was quite clear in the framework that we'd signed up for. And then it's about understanding actually what is our behavior doing. And COVID had a massive impact. I think everyone's lives has changed, sometimes beyond recognition, and the behaviors have changed. And it's just understanding, okay, our emissions we've already quantified our emissions for last year. They dropped dramatically. And we, in fact, have already met our 5-year target. But it's about understanding what changed that made that happen, and how do we hold on to those changes in a sort of meaningful way and in a sort of repeatable way to carry on the trajectory and to look ahead towards our 10-year target or even further. And do we need to be even more ambitious? if we're doing so well, that doesn't mean that we should just ease off. So, you know, for instance, during COVID, we obviously noticed that our travel reduced massively, both commuting and our business travel. So now going forward, we really question the need for reintroducing that travel. Our purchasing reduced just by sort of, you know, buying less stuff. And so we need to continue on that trend, but we also need to get smarter with our purchasing. So that's a real challenge for us to understand what we're buying and who we're buying it from and what their ambitions are and do they align with ours, and making decisions on that basis. And then obviously our energy journey as well, which wasn't so impacted by COVID because all of our sort of facilities still ran. So actually that's still quite a big target for us, to really reduce that energy, to look at green tariffs and think about the energy efficiency of our buildings going forward. So as I said, we've shown really good progress, but we need to, it's almost inevitably going to bounce back up, our emissions, but we need to sort of control that bounce and sort of harness those, I would say good or bad, but you know, those behaviors that helped us reduce those emissions and take them forward. And I think Tom's going to talk a lot more about that sort of behavioral aspect next. Tom, do you want to take over?
Yeah, thanks very much, Annie. So hi, so Tash has painted a picture of what this looks like at a corporate level, and Annie's just given us a really great description of what we're doing at a firm level as part of Arup's transformation. I'm going to take a different perspective now and talk about 3 different ways to enable individual level behaviour to help drive that same transformation. I'm going to do this by addressing the psychological and environmental influences on green behaviour, and then how this can scale and spread. So fundamentally, we're all different, right? And the reasons that motivate us to perform or to not perform green behaviours vary. And this is also true for organisations. So for one person, it might be to avoid a penalty or to save some money. For someone else, it might be because it fits their identity or their brand, or it might be because it gives them pleasure. Importantly, though, the reasons that compel you might not work for other people. So even though this is not a one-size-fits-all issue, we still rely on moral arguments a lot to encourage people to care about sustainability. Telling people why they should, or perhaps more accurately, why you think they should, act in an environmentally friendly way can actually make people more resistant towards green behaviours. Helping people to identify their own motivation, on the other hand, by connecting sustainability to the things that they already care about, is much less confrontational. So a participative rather than a prescriptive approach to generating motivations towards green behaviours is really useful. This can help create a more internalized form of motivation, which is more resilient over time than if you're doing something because it's important to someone else, for example. So our ability to identify and then access the reasons why we want to perform green behaviours is really critical in order for us to adopt them in the first place and then to stick with them over time. We don't exist in a vacuum, right? So we need to consider the context around us at all times. And this is really important for us because we adapt our behaviour in order to fit into our surroundings. So you can think about this in terms of how you might behave at work versus how you might behave at a sporting event, and then how you might behave if that sporting event was a tennis match versus if it was a football match. Context really is important, particularly in social settings like the workplace, where our perceptions of what behaviour is normal for this setting is a bigger influence than our personal environmental attitudes. As a setting, the workplace is especially important. And there's research that shows that the behaviours that we pick up at work, we tend to bring those home with us as well and perform them in our private lives. However, the green behaviours that we perform at home, for some reason, don't come with us to work. They don't make it past the scan cards at the entrance to the building. So some context actually matters more than others. To create environments that encourage green behaviours, first we need to think about the organisational environment as an interconnected web that includes physical assets, technology, processes and policies, corporate goals, but also people and culture. And I think a helpful way to think about this is it's a little bit like the various instruments that form an orchestra. Second, we need to look at the relationships between these parts and the whole that they create. Does this send a coherent and consistent signal that green behaviours are appropriate and expected? In other words, are all these instruments in tune and playing to the same sheet of music? Encouraging green behaviours needs to consider the workplace context and the signals that this sends to people about what behaviours will help them fit in. And the third thing I want to talk about is that our behaviour doesn't exist in isolation either. We're in this precarious situation because of the cumulative effects of billions of lifetimes worth of seemingly inconsequential behaviours. Our behaviours add up. Everything we do sends a signal that influences future behaviour by reinforcing or challenging our past behaviour. Each time we repeat a behaviour and get a desired outcome, we create a feedback loop that reinforces that. But we can leverage our motivation towards sustainability to help create new patterns of behaviour, which in turn can make it easier for us to adopt other green behaviours in the future. So not only do our behaviours add up, they also spread to other people. Humans are a really social species, and we pick up behavioural cues from others, particularly if we share an identity with them, such as working for the same company or having the same profession. So consider what behaviours you would like to see from others, and then try and role model these as part of your everyday life. Our individual behaviours are really important, and the choices that we make and our ability to role model for others is fundamental to enabling a transition to a more sustainable future. And I want to finish just by highlighting two key behavioural challenges. So as part of my work, I've spoken with a lot of leaders who understand the need, they've got the motivation, but they're stuck on the start line because they're worried that their first step won't be perfect or have enough impact. And they've got what we call action paralysis, and Tash spoke about this before. So it's really important to make those small steps and accept that these won't change the world overnight, but what they will do is create that momentum and make it easier for us to do a little bit more tomorrow, and ultimately build this repertoire of green behaviours that we can add to across our lifetime. And this is really important because our ability to translate good intentions into tangible actions, imperfect though they might be initially, is crucial because the goalposts will move as we transition. And Annie talked about this and what we're doing as a firm to stay ahead of government regulations in this area. So there's a real need for us to keep pace. Sustainability is a dynamic problem, and our behavioural response needs to be dynamic as well, because our behaviour fundamentally is really important. So thanks for listening. I'm going to hand over to Phil now, who's going to bring this all together for you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tom. So I think I have control. Great. Well, thanks, guys. And thank you, everyone in Red Or for hosting us. My name is Phil Walsh. I act as the Global Program Manager for Sustainable Development in Arup. So effectively, I'm helping lead the transformation program that we've got underway to make sustainable development everything we do. And yeah, again, before I start, just to say thank you very much for Red Or for hosting us. And it's a real privilege to be part of this. I do some really good talks this week, I can see, and we've Arup have a long sort of history with Red Or from right back to the beginning. So it's really nice to be part, and Red Or have a very important place to play in all of this. But what I want to do really, guys, is just give a little bit of a zoom out now, a bit of a helicopter view. We've looked at sort of three different parts of how Arup are looking at the transformation that our business needs to make. But what I want to do is zoom out and just show you maybe the bigger picture of what we're doing, and hopefully you might find it interesting and encouraging to whatever the different initiatives that are happening in your different organizations. So this is a little bit of a snapshot of our transformation plan, and we call our change plan a better way, because our motto is shaping a better world. So we're identifying this as a better way, and we call this the A Better Way wheel. And it's really a recognition of the fact that to do full firm-wide transformation, there's a lot of different aspects to be looked at, and it is cyclical. So one aspect leads into the other, and it feeds itself. So my colleagues Tash and Annie and Tom have all talked about different aspects. I mean, Tash talked about how we're looking at looking at our corporate sustainability and how that looks and needs to transform in the current changing environment. Annie talked about how we're you know, getting our own house in order and looking at the net zero corporate footprint, sorry, our carbon corporate footprint, and how we can transition that to net zero over time. And then Tom talked about the people side of this and the need to change culturally internally in the firm and the behavioral changes that need to happen. But again, these are just parts of a broader transformation program that we're looking at. So we've identified that there's really kind of four, the way we've split it up is there's sort of four key quadrants to this. And if you move around it, one is one aspect to this is learning, and it is what we call learning, and it's this is all about shaping our internal training, engaging with external training, developing modules, and building our capabilities, and making sure that we're continually pushing boundaries in terms of how we're training our staff, how we're structuring our career pathways, our learning pathways, and so forth. And then, of course, the enable, which we've talked a little bit about this morning, largely about getting our house in order, putting the systems and the approaches and the tools and the infrastructure in place such that our firm can push forward and be a sort of make sustainable development everything we do. And this goes not only just to the things that my colleagues have talked about, but it talks about it as well. It looks at how we are approaching our projects, how we set up our projects from the beginning, how we even decide which projects to go for, our bid procedures, our processes and our systems. Moving into the act is the really important part of our transformation, is recognizing that the biggest impact we have is what we do. And largely what we do is our projects and our businesses. And so the big influence, and this is a feature of this transformation plan, is that it has to be evolving. And we, as we move through each of the stages, the importance we place into different elements sort of expands or contracts as we kind of begin to change through the firm. And of course, all of this then leads to this very important aspect of influence. So we can influence, of course, through our clients, if we are doing good work and building good relationships and helping them shape projects in the right way from the beginning, but also through our partnerships, you know, including with Red Oar, but with many others as well. Who are the organizations we can collaborate with in our industry and beyond? And how can we bring thought leadership? How can we influence the narrative? How can we sort of advocate for the transition that we need to see across all of our organizations? And just to a snapshot of, you know, we've been working on this for quite a while, and where we are now is still very much in the place of adopting these principles, building them in. So we use a phrase internally here that we moved from activism to business as usual when we began to kind of raise awareness of this. And Tom talked a little bit about this, the need to mobilize our staff, to energize our staff, to come up with ideas, to push boundaries. But increasingly, we're moving to this idea of business as usual. We're trying to embed all of these principles into everything we do. I've also put a few blue tags in there talking about you can't do everything at once, and you have to prioritize. And we recognize the climate emergency and the need to get or look at our own carbon footprint and look at how we were influencing the projects that we were working on in terms of net zero and climate resilience was of crucial importance and remains our priority right now. But there's a suite of other things we need to look at, and we are looking at, including circular economy, biodiversity, social value, and a whole suite of other things. So this is just the emphasis about how you need to plan for the longer term, but you also need to move quickly and get your quick wins. I put this slide in. There was a real milestone for our organization last year when we published our new strategy. And if you open that strategy, on the opening page is this simple message. And I really like this. Literally the page hits you like this, and it says sustainable development is everything. And this emphasizes the criticality that we placed on embedding sustainable development into everything we do. So we recognize we can't, as Tom said, we can't just make this an add-on that we do on the side. It has to permeate every aspect of what we're doing as a firm, and that's our ambition, and that's our commitment over the next few years. And it was a very important milestone in that transition from activism to business as usual. And then finally, just a recognition really of the fact that we can't do this alone. And, we need to work with each other. This is a little slide that we use often to explain that sort of relationship. We can do what we can very well, and we can keep pushing the boundaries about how we structure ourselves and how we structure our projects. But ultimately, what we need to do is be pushing it on the x-axis as well, moving along to influencing our peers, or the market. And ultimately, if we all work together, we can really have transformation at a full scale wide. And we have to work together because of the scale of the problem. So really, this is just an emphasis on the importance of working together, and hence why we love to talk about different ways and explore different ways with each other, and about how we can do this. So really, that's to close. I hope that last bit gave you a kind of a helicopter view of the wider piece. We'd love to keep the conversation going. If any of you on the call have any questions or would like to discuss any more aspects of this, please do get in touch and reach out. And I think if there was any questions now, but I don't think there's any particular questions have popped up now, but if there are, please let us know. Yeah, thanks again for allowing us to share some of what we're doing. Over to you.
Thank you everyone. This was such a brilliant session, and I'm pretty sure that loads of interesting conversation will start as a result. Does anyone have any questions? I know that we're running out of time, but I still think that this is such an interesting topic that I'm pretty sure that we can stay for a bit longer.
Yeah, well, absolutely. As I said, please do reach out if there are thoughts or ideas or suggestions about what your organizations are doing, and we'd be more than happy to keep that discussion going offline as well.
That is great. It seems like there are no questions. So just once again, I would like to thank you all. I would like to thank our presenters for such a brilliant session. And I would like to thank Arup for making this happen. And once again, to remind you, if you haven't done it already, to donate on our Just Giving page to help us support, to help us with our work, to make sure that we can continue our work. And I would also like to invite you to our last session tomorrow, something completely different, a chair yoga session to help you kind of ease into your weekend. So everyone have a lovely day. Thank you for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.